So we saw a lot of selling in the aftermarkets and both the pre-markets for Tesla stock. However, today we pretty much moved sideways and consolidated around that 215 area. Now the 215 area has been a major focal point on the channel, and we'll go ahead and talk about the reasoning why later on in this video, but I want to go ahead and share something that I found pretty interesting with you guys. So I went on Twitter and I saw this interesting tweet from Gary Black, a fund manager, and he said Tesla stock continues to struggle, minus 26% versus minus 7% from the NASDAQ since 7/19 earnings call, over worries about Tesla's pricing and margins. Now, this is something I've been talking about. Now, he goes on to say, if investors believed Elon's rhetoric that he can make up the lost margin by selling more FSD, the stock wouldn't be acting so poorly. But few outside Twitter, and I would also say on YouTube as well, believe this, with Tesla's FSD take rate being below 10% and falling. Many portfolio managers are frustrated that Tesla is pursuing short-term discounting rather than building long-term brand equity through education of legacy auto consumers about the benefits of going EV. Short-term versus long-term thinking. Now we have this additional tweet from Gary Black saying, I own Tesla as my second largest position since I absolutely positively believe as EV adoption soars globally, Tesla will be the biggest beneficiary. Tesla has the best product, the most advanced autonomy, the most visionary CEO, and is moving quickly to expand its TAM by entering two huge segments, pickups and the 25 through 30K segment where all the customers are. Please don't tell me to sell my Tesla position. I just want the Tesla management team and board to take a longer term view in running its business and invest in educating current legacy auto customers why they should go EV rather than cutting prices. Now, I've highlighted this tweet as well because it's pretty much in sync with my belief with Tesla as well, especially that part where he talks about TAM, right? The total addressable market, especially because we know that Tesla has some good products in its product line with, of course, the Cybertruck, which is going to go ahead and capture a whole market. As I've showed in previous videos, that pickup trucks tend to be the most selling type of vehicle in this country, and then as well, about the future generation models that are going to be much more cheaper. So, I say all this because a lot of people confuse me for being bearish on Tesla. And it's like, no, I'm just bearish on Tesla in the short term, but I'm bullish on Tesla in the long term. Now, before we hop into my laptop, I just want to share a quick trade idea that we had in the Push and Profit private group, where it was a scalp trade where at 239 I've said, hey, this is an area where we've seen get tested by the SPY twice, and it looks like a good area for another scalp. And if we look closely, we see that SPY pretty much sold off exactly at that area, causing it for a great area for a scalp trade. So if you guys want to get access to those daily trade ideas, as well as access to my daily briefings where every single morning we talk about what's going on with the overall markets, make sure to check out the first link in the description below. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into my laptop so we could go ahead and cover Tesla in some further details. Alrighty, so we are officially in my laptop taking a look at Tesla stock from a daily time frame. Now, why am I really focused on this $215 area? Well, let's go ahead and recap a couple of things, right? So I've been bearish on Tesla for a while now, and in the short term, ever since Tesla had its earnings and its forward guidance. In fact, if you go back to videos from a couple of weeks ago, I've said that, we're going to see a lot more selling pressure for Tesla, right? And I talked about that this was an issue of fundamentals, but it's also an issue, right, and a story of technicals, as we see that Tesla is has been getting rejected at this descending trend line, right? And then I've also mentioned that, hey, around this area where there's this pocket of volume, right, where there's low volume relative to price, well, that's where we're going to see fast selling if there is selling pressure. Why? Well, when we're looking at volume profile, right, which is completely different from volume relative to time, we know that when there's little volume, that means that there's little exchange between buying and selling. So, of course, if there's selling pressure, that's going to push down through the order books. And I said, if we fall below this area, we're going to see, sharp selling off if there is selling pressure, right? And so that's exactly what we saw. Inversely, if you're seeing buying pressure where there's very little volume relative to price, well, you see big candles going upwards, right? And so, I talked about Tesla from the fundamental aspect, a technical aspect. I covered some economic data. And for a while, a lot of individuals just said that it was insane for Tesla to reach these levels, right? It said, oh man, Tesla's not going to reach those levels. And for a while, I've gotten a lot of bad comments about being bearish on Tesla, but here we are at the levels that I've said that we were going to enter from a few weeks ago. So what makes this 215 area very notable? Well, this is an area that I've been focusing on for a while, simply because when you look at it from a technical standpoint, we know that around over here, it's been an area of support. And then around over here, it's been an area of resistance. So does it mean that it's going to bounce up from here and start heading upwards? No, it's not guaranteed, right? When we're looking at technical analysis as one of the data points to analyze, it doesn't necessarily predict the future, but the purpose of technical analysis is to really measure what's currently going on. And so I said, hey, we want to pay attention to this 215 area, because if we start to see somewhat of a bounce, well, that could show that, hey, we're finally we sold off. We're going to see some bounce and a confirmation to an uptrend. Well, that's good. That's where I'm going to want to add into my long-term portfolio for Tesla, right? Because I don't want to just buy if something's going down. Think about back in 2022 when Tesla was just continuously going down, right? You don't want to just catch a falling knife, as I say, in the overall stock market, right? I like to wait for a sell-off and then, consolidation and confirmation of a reversal, right? So that's something that we want to pay attention to. Now, is it guaranteed to happen? No, absolutely not. We could see Tesla stock continue falling downwards, right? And so this is why it's a crucial area that we want to pay attention to. But what did we see today? We saw consolidation. And so that's pretty much good news, right? Now, for a while, let's go ahead and talk about something else. For a while, I've been talking about the 10-year Treasury note, and I've stated that, hey, when we were at these elevated levels just for the last couple of days at 4.3%, well, this is really bad for the overall stock market, right? It causes selling pressure for equities. Why is that? Well, when the 10-year Treasury notes are relatively high, well, that causes, pretty much an incentive for individuals to pull money out of, or capital out of, the stock market and put it into safer assets like treasury notes. Now, I know, everyone wants to argue whether treasury notes are the safest asset, right? And I always say this: if you're going to take your Series 7 to be, a licensed stockbroker, one of the questions they're going to ask you is, what's the safest investment you could make? And the answer is always going to be treasuries, right? And of course, that's in a perfect world. The scenario I always say is, if the country gets nuked, then of course anyone who bought treasury notes, they're probably not going to get paid, right? But in a perfect world, obviously if you buy treasury notes, it's a guaranteed return, right? And so when the yield is high, well, that's not necessarily good for the market. And that's why we saw a lot of selling pressure. I like to combine technical analysis with fundamental analysis along with everything that's happening in the overall markets. In fact, if we take a look at the last 3 years, treasury notes, they went up to 4.3%, just like they did back in October last year. Let's go ahead and head back to Tesla and go to a weekly time frame. Back in October last year, that's where we saw a lot of selling pressure, right? Now, of course, it wasn't just because of the yields. There's several different data points that contributed to a lot of the selling. In fact, one of the major ones was Elon Musk himself, selling a lot of shares of Tesla, causing the stock to pretty much capitulate. This way he could fund the acquisition of Twitter, or X.com now, right? Now, of course, there was also tax loss harvesting. I mean, there were several other factors. But one of the things you want to pay attention to is the 10-year Treasury. And I often tell the people that are the individuals that are part of the Push and Profit private group that you want to have the 10-year Treasury note, right, as of now, these days, pretty much pulled up, especially if you're scalping the market, right? So, just definitely a lot going on. Right? Now, let's go ahead and talk about something, right? Actually, let's go ahead and pull back to the Treasury and look at a 5-day period. We saw that it did pretty much start to steep downwards for today. And look at what ended up happening with SPY. Let's look at, and when I say SPY, I'm referring to SPY, which is the S&P 500 Index ETF. We see that Treasuries started falling down, and we actually saw that SPY started trending upwards, right? So this is why it's important to pay attention to several different data points. You can't just look at the charts. In fact, one of the things, let me go ahead and hop into Tesla where I quickly talk about this. But one of the things I mentioned in this morning's daily briefing for the Push and Profit private group is that you see a lot of individuals talk about, not just Tesla stock, but any stock, and they only focus on technical analysis. Why is that? Well, technical analysis is one of the easiest types of analysis that you can learn, right? It's much more difficult to really understand fundamental analysis, to really understand how the economy works. And so a lot of times they just draw levels on a chart, and they say, hey, a stock broke this level and this way. This is the reason why it's selling off, because it broke this level. But it's, if you ask them what's the underlying reasoning why, the markets are selling off, they couldn't tell you anything besides point to a line on a chart. And this is why I often say you want to have a holistic approach to the market and really look into everything, right? I always say, a lot of these individuals, they're lacking understanding in markets, yields, fundamentals, or values, and might look at a situation such as rejection and say, oh yeah, it's just selling off because of this, right? They might misinterpret a break and naively declare that, oh, well, now we're hitting support, so now we're going to start bouncing up. Or, oh, bro, it's bouncing up my RSI indicator, so we're oversold, right? In fact, I actually saw some individuals both on YouTube and Twitter say the market can't continue selling off simply because it's sold off so much, right? And that's honestly ridiculous, because what about when the market was rallying upwards? You didn't hear individuals saying, oh, well, the market can't continue rallying anymore because it already rallied too much. That's like a juvenile approach, right? A childlike approach, childlike logic to really look at the overall markets. You can't just look at it like that, right? And so this is why I try to make these videos. So I try to make it clear that, of course, I don't have a crystal ball, but the reason why I'm better positioned in, obviously trading and obviously looking at what's going on in the overall markets is because, I'm looking at several different data points. It's not just mere guesswork, right? I've been clear all week about the importance of keeping an eye on yields. If the 4.3 10-year treasury yields, make a new high, well, you want to brace yourself for selling. In simple terms, 4.3 and above equals bad, right? And so those who don't grasp the complexities might naively declare that, the selling is overdone, but that necessarily doesn't mean anything, right? I've been very acute in my assessments of various stocks, with, Tesla being the main one that I talk about. But and I'm not trying to really just be braggadocious over here and say I'm the best, because obviously I don't have a crystal ball, as I try to say, but you want to look at things from a bigger picture. So what are some things that we want to look at going forward now? Now that we talked about all this, right? And I'm sure individuals who watch me religiously or they're part of the Push and Profit private group, you guys might say, oh my gosh, this guy is repeating the same things very often. And, I think this is one of the best ways to learn, right? Because obviously you want to learn from someone who's able to repeat the process and you guys see it happening over and over again, right? I think that's one of the best ways to approach the market. So let's go ahead and talk about some things. What are we looking at? Well, we know that Tesla finally hit that 215 level. And so if it starts bouncing up, that could provide an opportunity to start buying, whether it's in the short term in your short-term trading account or your long-term investment account. By the way, I do want to address something. Oftentimes I do get comments of people saying, how can you be long on Tesla but short on Tesla in the short term, right? And let me go ahead and explain this. I know I said it in other videos, but I want to say it again. I do have a Tesla as one of the few individual stocks in my long-term investment portfolio, but I have a separate trading account where I trade, the fluctuations in prices for stocks like Tesla, right? So on one account, I can be more agile going up and down, taking advantage of the intraday prices. But in my long-term account, of course, I'm long-term on Tesla and I buy every time there is a dip with confirmation of an uptrend. So that's one way to do it. But there's other ways to do that, right? We've seen Warren Buffett, right? One of the greatest investors of all time. He could be bullish on the markets in the long term, but bearish in the short term without having two separate accounts. What does he do? Well, what he simply does, and you guys can look this up, is, when the market starts, selling off and we see confirmation of an uptrend, he says buy when everyone's fearful, or be greedy when everyone's fearful, be fearful when everyone's greedy. And so he'll start buying long. But what happens when the market starts selling off? Well, you could look it up. He'll sell calls, right? That's another way where you could have a long-term investment account but still make money even with the market going down. You have to be able to understand how to take advantage of the prices within the market, regardless whether we're in a bear market or a bull market, whatever the cyclical cycle is, or the cycle is, you want to go ahead and be able to navigate both types of markets. So, without talking too much, let's go ahead and talk about something else, right? So what are we looking for? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening in the future. So one of the things I've said that we absolutely want to pay attention to is going to be on the pretty much the Jackson Hole Summit, right? So we're going to have Fed Chairman Jerome Powell speak, And pretty much every time he speaks at these annual summits, we see a massive swing for the overall markets. We saw this in 2021 and 2022, and this is going to provide more clarity on where the Federal Reserve is pretty much at. We had recently the Federal Reserve meeting minutes, and we saw that there was a lot of dissent between a lot of the members in the Federal Reserve, and they had a more hawkish rhetoric, a more hawkish tone. And so I said that this meeting could possibly be the opportunity where we hear a more dovish tone for the markets, or from these central bankers, which could provide some opportunities for the markets, right? And so pretty much that's at Friday of next week. Besides that, next week is pretty slow with economic data. Of course, we're going to have initial jobless claims that comes out weekly. Then we have, a few things, right? We obviously, first of all, let me address something. So the Fed official interviews Jerome Powell. It's going to be a 2-day thing, August 24th and August 25th. So let me clarify that the Thursday is going to be the big day for the move, right? As usually the second day after Jerome Powell speaks, we already know what was said, right? But then after that, we have some more big news. So what comes after that speaks from Jerome Powell? Well, we have job openings, the JOLTS. We get consumer confidence coming out. We have the ADP report, which always comes out before we actually get the the government job numbers, right? So that's important. We also get PCE, which is the preferred inflation gauge from the Federal Reserve. A lot of individuals put a lot of attention towards the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, but the PCE is primarily what the Federal Reserve likes to look at. And so we're going to have a lot of, and then of course that Friday we have all the job data, non-farm payroll, unemployment, hourly wages. So a lot happening after next week, but it does start pretty soon, right? Definitely a lot of data that we absolutely want to pay attention to. And we're going to see a lot of movement in the overall market. And this is a very pivotal moment. Are we going to start seeing some dovishness from these, or hearing some dovishness from the central bankers? Are we going to start seeing, a different story getting spun out for the market? So definitely an area that we want to pay attention to. Again, I want to clarify, I don't have a crystal ball, so we could actually go further below the 215 or start bouncing up. I've just highlighted in previous videos that this is an area that we want to pay attention to because this pretty much depicts where the direction for Tesla most likely is going to continue going. So a very crucial area. But with that said, I don't want to make this video any much more longer than it already needs to. I think I've said enough. Let me know in the comment section below what are your thoughts on Tesla, both in the short term and the long term. And also make sure to check out the links in the description below, because one of the links is a link to the Push and Profit private group. But there's also another link for my free weekly newsletter. So if you can't join the Push and Profit private group, that's completely fine. There is a free alternative where every single Sunday I sent out an email going over what's going on in the overall markets. So definitely take advantage of that. I think not enough people know about that. And with that said, I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.